This is a podcast where real doctors discuss fake medical emergencies. That means that unless you've just won a drugged-out Swedish dance-off, this podcast is not medical advice. If you need medical advice or medical care, please contact your doctor.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jackson Vane.
I'm Johnny Kolasinski. You might remember you from such podcasts as Play Ya Ya Ding Dong, a history of fake Scandinavian folklore music.
I remember that now because that was the 10th time we've done it.
Yeah, that was pretty. You did pretty well.
Yeah, thanks,
good
guys.
job. Good job.
This is Hi Everybody, a bad medicine podcast. Every week we talk about what Hollywood gets right and wrong about medicine and how the body works. You can find this podcast online at Hi Everybody MD on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or at www.hieverybodymd.com.
You can also call us at 530-DOCTORB. That is 530-DOCTORB. The B stands for...
Blood Eagle?
Yeah, sure. Let's do Blood Eagle.
That's nice.
I think that's a good segue for this movie of Hortober.
Yeah, this is a Horror-tober film that
Horror-tober.
we're discussing this week.
Hashtag
Forgot
Hortober.
all about Hortober.
It has been a year. Like Toyota Fest, it comes only once a year.
It's been a long year.
It has been a very long year, and we are back with Hortober.
Yeah, and we are joined for Horror-tober by Dr. Greg
Horror-tober.
Hi guys. Hi everybody.
You'll get it someday.
One day I'll get.
One day you'll get it. So we're going to be discussing the 2019 film Midsommar.
Was this the first really big A24 film?
No,
There was The Witch first, but The Witch was a surprise.
They did The Disaster Artist as well.
Oh,
So they've done some
Okay.
pretty good movies that I enjoy.
What is A24?
A24 is a production company that does a lot of art house films.
yeah.
And-
They generally go for like weird craft films like Midsommar or The Disaster Artist or The Lighthouse. Hereditary.
Good movies.
Yeah.
But this one, if you guys haven't seen it, it's basically about a group of, I guess, postdoctor or postgraduate students going to a Swedish.
I think if you
Festival?
haven't seen it, you should actually. If you like
Yeah.
horror
You
movies, you should
should.
see it, and you should.
Normally, we don't say you absolutely have to see this before you listen to the podcast.
I mean, I think this is a great movie, and I love horror movies, and it would be a disservice to listen to about the movie
Yeah.
without seeing it.
I'll also,
Take the 2 hours. We'll wait.
But also, if you don't care about it, you can just listen to us.
but I'll say it's not like a horror movie in the sense of horror movies. Like it's more suspense.
Yeah.
Than jump scares. And I think that's the thing a lot of people don't like about horror movies is like that whole dark, ominous,
Right.
something bad's going to happen, jump scare. This
My
one is
wife does not like jump scare movies. She doesn't like movies that are dark from a like palette standpoint.
yeah. This
And
is
really like this movie.
thanks for slipping that one in there.
This movie took me a long time to get through. Like this, it starts pretty just dark. I mean, just from where the characters are at, and it like physically took me 3 or 4 attempts to get through it because it's really well done and it sets up a lot of like anxiety, eerie stuff. But it's not. You should watch it if you're interested in it. That's
Yeah.
the best I could say.
But that is a good segue to like the first scene. It is very hard to watch. And it is like not just like thematically dark, but also scenery wise very dark. But it opens up with Danny's, who's the main character, worried about her sister who's bipolar and suicidal and is making a lot of posts online about wanting to kill herself. And she's worried that she might actually do it.
Yeah, her sister makes a literal goodbye post.
Yeah. And that's always like a concerning thing, especially if you have someone who's been doing that a while and it's like a cry for attention. It's something that, you should take seriously. And I think in this situation, people are kind of downplaying it. At least her horrible boyfriend and his friends were all downplaying it. But then she ultimately does commit the deed. And that was like really one of the hard scenes to get through.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is out of nowhere. Like the opening scene from a movie, it's a pretty strong.
Yeah. The title scene,
tough.
the title has not even been shown yet.
Right.
Like they don't show until after the deed is done. And basically what they did was it was a carbon monoxide poisoning where Danny's sister set up a car in the garage very elaborately, I might add too, with the tubings and whatnot, one going to the parents' room and then the other straight to her face.
Right. It's like the PTSD version of Up, like the first 15 minutes of Up. It's like
God.
It's really hard to get through.
I mean, Up is its own type of PTSD.
Yeah.
It gets you right in the old heartstrings, I think.
Yeah, this gets you in a different string. Like maybe in the cockles.
Yeah.
Or the cockles of the cockles. It's like not fun. I will also say this is one of those things where people say it's a very peaceful death. And it is. It can be if you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I imagine so this is carbon monoxide poisoning, right?
Correct. Right. Yeah.
And it's people die of this in their sleep if they have faulty
gas appliances.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. So people have accidental deaths of this, and it's one of those things where people don't, you can't ask someone after the fact. So it's just people look peaceful.
I will say, like, this was one of I've seen a lot of carbon monoxide poisonings at work. The craziest story was during Super Bowl when I was working all during Super Bowl. No one died, but the game ended and this family, like 6 kids and their 2 parents who were super drunk, got brought in by ambulance because they were all throwing up, having headaches, sore throats, difficulty breathing, because the carbon monoxide meter was going off the entire game, but the parents were too busy watching the game.
And they thought it was like an air horn or something?
Yeah. So they just didn't pay attention to it. And then when the fire department came in, they said the meter read too high to read.
Oh, wow.
So if they had stayed any longer, they would have been dead.
Yeah.
But
and carbon monoxide is a colorless and odorless gas that can be an effect of your gas appliances not burning natural gas properly.
And those people were belligerent. And also because their team lost, oh my God.
They were
Were they Falcons
poisoned,
fans?
and
Were they
angry.
Falcons fans?
No, it was like when the Patriots lost the last time. And I'm trying to remember when that was.
Oh, wait, was that the Falcons? I don't remember. I'm bad at football.
This wasn't last year.
No. Oh, no, they lost to the Eagles. I remember this because I watched an It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode that we're going to do at another time where Charlie is home alone, but future episode. But that's why they came in very belligerent, yelling at me and also trying to throw up on me at the same time. And I wasn't sure if it was throwing up from carbon monoxide or alcohol. But
Okay, no los dos.
yeah, and the way they looked, they were not blue. They were very, very red. And I was trying to remember this during the movie because in the movie, everyone who was dead was blue. So you turn blue from cyanide, you turn red, cherry red to carbon monoxide.
You turn blue from lots of things, though, right?
Correct.
But immediately from cyanide.
And I wouldn't say immediately, but when you look dead or poisoned, you're more blue with cyanide than with carbon monoxide.
And I'm going to try to pull some things out of my old med school brain, but it's like with carbon monoxide, you have oxygen. It's just displaced, right? It's not the
It's competitively binding.
That's what it is. Thank you.
Yes.
Jackson can pull it out of his brain.
I also did just have another patient like that last night. I am running on no sleep again.
Oh, perfect.
I know. It's just how I run this podcast is not with sleep, but it works.
It's how I edit this podcast, so.
It's true. The other thing that was weird was the sister's eyes were really cloudy, and I don't think your eyes turn cloudy that quickly.
It was a weird choice because it makes you sort of stare at her face, and it's also with everything else she's got a hose duct tape to her mouth, and it's very shocking, but it also something felt not quite right about it.
Yeah,
I can't really say
I
what.
couldn't tell if her eyes were cloudy or if she was dichromatic, where she had one blue eye and one brown eye, and it was just a weird choice.
There was definitely the pupil was white.
Johnny, do you always try to get one eye into every podcast?
Yeah, I have a unique perspective.
Oh, you got to keep your eye on that perspective. I can't even say the word perspective. But
That's right. I can't say the word Scandinavian.
touche. I will also say the only time your eyes are cloudy when you're looking at dead stuff, fish. So unfresh fish have cloudy eyes.
I was like, if you eat fish, your eyes get cloudy.
Yeah,
Super
Jackson
cloudy.
does.
Yeah, that's why my vision's so great.
That's really the opening of the movie and kind of our introduction to Danny as a character, and then we find out that she's in a relationship with a guy who is planning on bouncing, but then her family literally just died. So instead he says, why don't you go on this road trip with my buddies that was going to be my rebound?
So they end up going to Sweden for this Midsommar festival. And
I believe it's pronounced Midsommar.
I'm sorry, Midsommar festival. And they really like drugs.
Yeah. their first introduction to everything that's going on is, hey, let's all do some mushrooms.
I will say this as a practicing physician, you're right. I mean, they show up at this place and they start doing some hallucinogenic drugs. I think it's important to acknowledge that every culture is different, and in some cultures they're not quite as stigmatized as they are in the U.S. And so those psychedelics can be used in ritualistic fashion or in coming of age type of ways that are very much culturally acceptable that they really kind of aren't in our culture.
Like ayahuasca.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. And so I think, them doing that initially as they get there is part of setting the stage for them sort of engaging with this other culture. None of them seem like they're inexperienced with it, but it's also just kind of like, hey, here's a drug you guys know you're going to do it to start with, and now stuff's going to get weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the thing that was kind of interesting was how they made these subtle hallucinations seem very realistic.
Yeah, and that's what I think they do very well is by being so subtle with it.
It's not the face melting LSD trips that you always see on TV.
Yeah,
it's more everything's really wavy, everything kind of just wispy,
a little out of focus.
Yeah. And
my focus is weird.
I mean,
and it also pulls you into it because it's not obvious. And so the way that this is a great movie. You should really see it. I think you should really see it if it sounds interesting if you haven't. But that by being so subtle, like often you start to question whether or not you saw the thing that you did. Mm-hmm. And so this is now the like third or fourth-ish time. Granted, when I've seen the movie, I don't always get through it, but you can pick up on more and more of those subtleties because the shockingness of the story is not kind of hitting you in the face, but you see that stuff in the background. One of the things that you can see in a couple scenes is like these faces in trees that are they're there and they're not subtle, but you wouldn't catch it if you're paying attention to the story in front of you.
And I think when you're looking at all these like hallucinations and how weird things were, I think one thing you brought up was like, is this like a shared delusion kind of disorder kind of picture where everyone's kind of acting off and seeing or acting weirdly?
You specifically brought that up, though, in the first really, really disturbing scene we had.
Yeah.
Which was when we had the two senior citizens.
I did. That's not when I brought it up.
Oh,
I brought it up later. I wrote it down because of something that your wife had said. And I was trying to do a little bit of active processing while we were watching it, and it's weird because in any culture that you're not used to, some of the stuff they do is strange. It's not like it's strange until you're kind of wrapped up in it, and it's like, oh, this is what this group of people does. And so, to me, watching this movie, I sort of looked at it like that, where this whole Midsommar Festival is, it is their traditional thing that they do, and if you're even as an outsider, you're gonna do your part as an outsider to try to be a part of it. It's like when you go to you go to meet your significant other's family for the first time and they do something in a weird way and just like, well, I guess I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Like you're wrapped up in it. You're part of it. And the longer that you do it, the more you're going to be a part of that. And as this story builds, and especially as, they're given more and more drugs and it's like more and more powerful stuff and you're getting wrapped up more and more in that whole experience.
Yeah. Because it's pretty jarring. Like this whole, like they go from 0 to 100 real quick. And I think you were alluding to the next part, which is like I wrote down the word atastupa, which is ritual suicide of old people.
Yeah, I think that's Swedish for old fall. I made that up just now.
Oh,
I could believe it.
I would have believed. I totally would have believed.
If we were playing Boulder Dash, you get my point.
You would have won right there. But it's true though.
This podcast is brought to you by Jackbox.
I can't wait for the next one. But this scene was like a rough one. I would say.
Oh, this actually. So the first time I watched it, this was the third time I stopped the movie and had to rewind it. Because I wasn't sure that I saw the thing that I saw and was like, wait a minute. And had I waited 2 more seconds, I would have seen it again. But it's really jarring.
Yeah.
And let's make a point that it's an hour into the film. Like,
is it really?
Is it really an hour?
Yeah.
It did not feel like that. It felt.
Oh,
we did.
Yeah, we skipped through it this time, but we all have.
Yeah.
All seen it.
But
more
I
than
remember
once
just
beforehand.
Yeah. I think it was building up to it because. they had all these old people on pedestals, and you're like, oh, this is nice.
That's right. I forgot about that part where
They fed them, they ate really well, and then they got put on pedestals and stuff.
Who directed and wrote this movie? I feel like
Ari Aster. Ari Aster.
I just feel like they should get some credit. It's a good movie. I'm sure they've gotten plenty of credit. I just am off my movie director game these days.
Also, it's only been a year and a half.
Yeah,
since last
this came out.
Yeah.
It took a lot of my friends had told me to watch this, and
I saw this in the theater.
And it took me a while to get around to it. And then the first time I tried to watch it, I literally didn't get past the opening. And then the next time,
it was a tough watch in the theater.
Took a while.
You should still watch this movie. Don't let us discourage you. It's real good.
If you watched it once when we told you to watch it earlier, you should watch it again now and then come back to this podcast. Yeah.
But that first lady, so what they do is they all go to the top of a cliff, like a very tall cliff. They ritualistically cut their hands and then rub their blood onto some rune stones. And then the old lady kind of stands at the edge, kind of building up to it. You can see Danny, who really should not be looking at something like this after such a traumatic event of her family dying. And then the lady just kind of belly flops, I guess is the best way to describe it, onto a rock from the top of the cliff.
That's a swan dive.
You think swan dive?
I think so.
I mean, it would explain why her face was pretty,
That was when I sort of like saw it out of the corner of my eye. I was like, what just happened?
Yeah. And I will say, like I always complain about, should be bloodier.
We were debating about this as it happened. And although I agree, I think there's ways that people can fall to their death and it not be so bloody as well.
My counter argument would be the rock looked pretty jaggedy. So she probably would have torn the clothes a little bit and there should have been some puncture wounds. Hence the blood.
The rock she was jumping off of?
Onto.
Or the one she was landing on? Okay.
Onto.
That one looked pretty flat, actually.
But her face was real beat up.
So when you see like pools of blood a lot, and
you never get that pretty pool of blood.
But the reason why blood is pooling is because your heart is still pumping. Granted, if your heart stops, you still have blood. It's still going to come out a little bit. But like normally when you see blood flow, it's because your heart is pumping out blood. If you have my thought, and this is not backed up by anything other than me having a thought about it while we were watching the movie.
Sure,
was it's there's the joke that it's not the fall that kills you, it's the stop, right?
The landing.
So when somebody, even in car accidents or anything else, a forceful fast stop, it's the stopping that causes the internal injury. Yep. The things inside of your body are still moving that speed when suddenly your body isn't moving that speed anymore. And so one of the things that you can have happen is you can have damage to any of the internal organs. The biggest one is you can rupture your aorta. That's the big vessel coming out of your heart. If that happens, you bleed out, but you bleed out inside of your body. And if that happens, then I don't think you would see a lot of blood. You would see, you would be a little bit bloody, but a thing that I think this even comes up later I know it comes up later in the movie.
You mean like 2 minutes later?
No, way later. I'll get to that too. But if you've ever cut yourself, it's not like things start bleeding immediately. It's you cut yourself and then you look, you're like, did I cut myself? And then you start seeing blood flow. There's a little lag behind while that injury kind of manifests itself. And I think because of the suddenness of this, that's why I can believe that maybe there wouldn't be as much blood.
I would think at least there'd be a lot more pooling of blood in the head.
I would say there should be more gore because her face is emptied.
Yeah.
And there's a brain in there.
There's not enough fat. I will say, as a guy who's seen a lot of like head trauma that is significant to the brain, it looks a little more pink and fatty.
Yeah. I can say more gore. I'm fine with the amount of blood.
It reminds me this is not a video podcast, is I'm just making squeamish ew faces all through this conversation.
It's pretty funny.
We made him step back. We made like the frame by frame advance and rewind for a while. It got a little dark.
Back and to the left.
Back and to the left. This reminds me of, I kind of mentioned this when we were watching the movie. It reminded me when I was in med school and when I had to go to the coroner. We had a person who jumped off of a 30-story building, and he essentially was just mush. And I also there is something about how you hit the ground too, and that's demonstrated immediately afterwards, right? Yeah.
So
this guy landed prone. So
this girl.
No, I'm talking about the jumper I saw. So he landed on his hands and feet, kind of. So he crushed down, and he just was mush. So that's That was a day where I remembered my classmates in the corner just dropping.
I mean, that's a gross thing to see.
Oh yeah.
I would also recommend, if you have the opportunity to go to your county coroner's office, if it's something that interests you, they are pathologists and the people that are coroners are fascinating people, first of all.
Yeah.
And their job, if you can sort of handle it's really interesting. You will learn some stuff about some stuff going on wherever you live, because they are the people that see the aftermath of cases and crimes.
I will say the hardest part about going to the coroner is not the sights. It's the smells. The smells. Wow.
I will say that if you told me when I was studying theater in college that I'd be co-hosting a podcast saying, hey, go do a shadow at your local coroner, I
learned a lot.
Yeah. And sounds like
Next,
really good advice for the kind of people that's really good advice for.
and Johnny, I'll say next time, like we get offered to go once a year when the new fellows are training. I will let you know. I'll extend an invitation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm washing my hair.
You look ecstatic.
It is a jarring experience. I will say that.
Do we want to talk about the second?
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
because I want to talk about the sound design as well.
What the thing that I was saying is, the way that somebody hits matters.
Yeah.
And so actually the forward back stress on your heart.
You mean the coup contra coup?
Yes. But that stress when you're in an accident,
so that's why blunt traumas are so much more difficult to survive than penetrating trauma, because it's ooh, the giggles when I say penetrating trauma. It's because it's such a diffuse stress onto tissue that it can burst a lot more vessels and ultimately compromise the organ.
It's like the blast injury from an explosion.
Correct.
Where it's so much damage everywhere that there's nothing your body can really do.
Yeah.
But
blast and penetrate. Yep.
But so what I was kind of saying, the reason that I thought about why there shouldn't be that much blood for that first lady is because think about the way the second guy lands, right? He's straight up and down. No, he lands on his feet. So that's kind of the difference, is like he lands, he doesn't die, right? That's not a necessarily.
No. He did burst some vessels in his eyes,
and he also burst some vessels in his leg.
He burst some legs in his legs.
And so like there, I feel there should be more blood. Like he's alive.
Yeah, that should be just spurting out blood.
I mean, and even if it should be spurting because he definitely ruined the artery. So when you have horrible injuries like that, those arteries, I believe, are on under a little bit of tension, and they also, your muscles clamp down, and so people can survive those horrible injuries to their arteries in the lower legs.
So they can in the lower legs only because there's so many compartments in there.
Right, that's what I mean.
And that can
Thank
clamp
you for
down
saying
stuff.
it in a smart medical sounding way.
I do discuss this from time to time. It can compress all that, but odds are it probably also affected as like femoral artery and whatnot. And femur fracture is one of the big ways where you can actually lose a lot of blood and die potentially. So like
Point of order, he did not fracture his femur.
We don't know.
I mean, I can see two bones that he fractured.
Yes, but you don't have X-ray vision. You can't tell if his femur broke.
He's got
force has to transfer.
He's got a compound fracture that is below his knee. Compound means the bone is sticking out of your body. That's a medical emergency.
Open fracture. Compound is multiple pieces.
Jackson knows his stuff.
He has
I'm just a talking head.
Open compound fracture of the tibia and fibula.
Yeah.
Bilaterally.
I believe it's just one. I thought it was just his left.
He just looks like hell.
He does. You know what? He's probably, given the remote location of this, he's not going to survive this injury.
Yeah.
Let's just go ahead and say trilaterally. Is that a thing?
Well,
depends on how big that third leg is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But here's the thing. You're right. He won't survive that leg injury much longer because a hammer comes out.
That is correct. That is correct.
Yeah, that's a little excessive. That you expect more blood.
Is that medically accurate, Jackson? That's out of my purview.
I will say this.
We don't use hospice hammer.
I will say this. It's the same complaint you had about the lady. That guy's head seemed too empty.
It did, and they made a point to show kind of the close-up, and it
was too bouncy.
I think it would bounce a little.
I feel like it was a very light tap.
I think that was
of the hammer.
I actually agree, but I think that was an artistic choice to show it that way because they have the three people swing it.
Yeah.
as I'm talking about this movie, I'm liking it more and more. The first time I watched it, it was such it felt like an emotional chore that I was just happy that I got through it. And so this time it's
pretty visceral.
Yeah, but also now that it's not surprising, it was easier to sort of enjoy.
But, so if you're listening to this right now and you
should probably
haven't
go watch
seen it for a third time, you should go watch it right now, and we'll wait.
Oh man, but yeah, I think the head was too empty, and it could. This goes back to your argument, like the heart is still beating, right? Them getting his head slammed in doesn't necessarily mean his heart's going to stop right away.
For sure, I said that one should be.
That one should be.
That's why I'm saying that
should be
first one. I'm fine with it not being bloody. Yeah. Second one, so as usual, there should have been more blood.
Yeah, which is always the complaint we have. I mean, if there was going to be a bloodier movie, this could be it. But there were some scenes with like appropriate blood. But yeah, this scene was. I remember the first time I watched it, and I was just flabbergasted.
Yeah.
Wait, you saw this in the theater?
Yeah.
Like, what was that? Were people like, oh, I feel like this is a Gatsby movie.
It was pretty gaspy, and I'm like, huh, ew.
I actually can't imagine watching this in the theaters because walking out of it and just walking into bright lights and a urinal would be super weird, as opposed to just like pausing it and saying, holy crap, what the crap.
I actually disagree because of the way this movie ends. This I don't know if
you feel pretty good.
Right. Yeah, you feel sort of, I mean, there's some catharsis there, but also it ends bright and happy.
The whole movie is bright.
Yeah.
And I will say this, when I remember when I finished the movie, I'm like, that was really good. I kind of want to watch it again.
That is not how I feel.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of things I needed to process again. And I think that's the reason why, is that there were things I didn't understand.
All of us watched it a second time independently before we decided to do this as a episode.
And I just remembered, it was like, oh man, this is nuts. And there's a lot of weird, bloody shenanigans in it. And it threw me for a loop. And also with like the psychiatric stuff. And I know that's the thing we haven't touched on this podcast that much, really.
This is the first time, by the way, that I'm going to say that, no, there were no shenanigans in this movie. The weird, bloody shenanigans, no, it was not shenanigans. This was not.
I swear to God, if you say shenanigans one more time.
Going to the psychological aspects, Greg, something you brought up in the jumping off the... not Rumspringa, because that's an actual thing. The Scandinavian cliff dive scene, the sound editing.
Yeah, and that was part of why I watched this movie the first time I saw it by myself, and like there's a whole bunch of things about it that are designed to increase your anxiety. One of the things I really like in this movie is that there's anxious music, but it's not like horror music, anxious music. It's just like building tension music. And as Danny is watching this, as she's sort of realizing what's about to happen, these people who are about to kill themselves, it kind of does like this. There's all this stuff happening in the background, and then it focuses on Danny, and it's just like silence.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that people who have been through traumatic experiences, or if you have ever been into like a car accident or anything that has happened, that's thing that is often explained like, I couldn't hear, like, the world just kind of went dark. I couldn't hear anything. There's kind of this...
the silence ringing
Yeah,
in the
she has
background.
got like the silence ringing in her ears. I think they did a really good job making you feel like her, right?
Yeah,
you get pulled into that scene.
I've dealt with PTSD, and it's very freaking accurate as to what your memory of the experience is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's you haven't encoded all the things that were going on. You're so pinpoint focused on the thing.
And they zoomed in, like her face was the main focus, just to really recognize that.
There's another movie that does it really well. It's with Jason Gordon-Levitt, his cancer movie.
50-50.
50-50.
Yeah. In 50-50, when he gets his cancer diagnosis, that's a scene that I've had patients explain to me about when they got their diagnosis of whatever illness. I am a hospice doctor, so I talk to a lot of patients who have significant terminal illnesses, and it's kind of this moment frozen in time where they hear this diagnosis and everything else it disappears for them.
Yeah.
And in 50-50, there's a short little scene, and that thing happens, but also as an audience member watching, you can hear the rest of the scene going on, and it's just done really, it's done very well. Maybe we should do 50-50.
Yeah, it's on my list.
Okay.
So anytime that you, or almost any time where you hear the humming of this character is deaf because of a grenade going off, what they're actually hearing might be close to what Danny is of that hyperfocus, if they can hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's any war movie that all of a sudden the grenade goes off and all the other sound dies. That's what it's like that.
That ringing in the ear.
I'm not going to do it because people are listening to this.
I'll just move my phone close to the microphone.
You don't want to. You don't want to.
We can all get it.
Dolphin hum.
But I mean, that's one of the things I think this movie does well, and I mean, this is not a movie, but it's just like it really brings you in with little things like that are really.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. None of us are psychologists or psychiatrists, but this is a great movie as well from a.
Yeah, there's some pathology in there. There's some psychiatric pathology on display from a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone has something wrong. Like pretty much.
Just like real life.
Yeah. And I think it's a good segue into how Danny cannot sleep and then needs to ask for sleeping pills the whole time and then has some weird dreams. Like really weird dreams. And I'm wondering, I have never taken Ambien.
I have.
How does that?
Oh my gosh, it's dead on.
Roseanne did.
Yeah, she did, and I didn't have Twitter
yeah.
when I was taking Ambien regularly.
You also didn't have a TV show that you could lose too.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
But as far as the everything is absolutely normal and nothing is right feeling.
Yeah, it's weird because they start that scene starts and you don't really realize that it's a dream sequence. It just looks like she wakes up the next day, and then everything's a little bit off. And then it's weird.
Yeah,
I mean, I think they did a good job representing that particular drug as well.
Yeah,
because it went in like I think one of you guys were explaining it was like REM sleep and then all of a sudden shenanigans.
Well, yeah,
That's
I think
right. I said shenanigans.
if you've ever had a long night drinking and then you wake up in the morning and then you go back to sleep, often you can have pretty intense dreams then, and I think part of that reason is because your body hasn't gone through your normal sleep cycles if you just kind of passed out.
Allegedly.
That's anyway.
No one drinks beer on this podcast.
Yeah.
No, never.
But also don't drink till you pass out. But if something like that happens, it means your body hasn't actually gotten any restorative sleep, and you need restorative sleep. That's part of that.
And so is it like trying to rush it?
Yeah, it's trying to make up for that time. You haven't done any of the sleep cycling, so now you're getting in that REM cycle sleep, and it's when you have those super intense dreams, and it feels like you had a super long dream, and you wake up and it's like 4 minutes later. I mean that's sort of how that scene selection feels to me.
Going outside of drugs or beer, it is I just slept for 3 hours when I hit my snooze button for 10 minutes. Is that a similar experience of your body trying to get back into that REM sleep?
There is a whole specialty based on sleep and sleep psychology and sleep pathology. And it seems to be, although there's a lot of science, there's also a lot of art to understanding it as well as anything in medicine has. And I just don't know it well enough to make a meaningful comment on it. I know how I have felt when I have not gotten sleep, or if I've stayed up super late for, a couple days in a row, and then suddenly you get that sleep, and it's just like your dreams are different. I
think a good example is me sleeping today and getting maybe like 2 or 3 hours and just cannot go back to sleep.
Yeah.
It just is like nothing makes sense. It just in your sleep dream logic, everything makes sense. Right. And you wake up and you're like, it's a continuation of it, and you go, none of that
happened was real.
And none of that made sense at all.
And then you watch Midsommar,
and then everything makes sense. I mean, that's kind of what it feels like. It's just this weird, nonsensical dream. If I use the example of not sleeping for a while,
yep,
it's not fun. I kept on writing Cheaty because I forgot his real name. Josh was it?
Yeah, Josh was the character.
Yeah,
William Jackson Harper. Is that the actor?
Correct. He wanted to learn more about their rituals and whatnot and tried to steal the ruby.
Not the ruby rod.
Riyadh? Something like that. Steal the sacred text written by the inbred.
Yeah.
But then
Let's just call it the ruby rod. so that
Yes,
Greg
please.
can just finish his giggle.
But he gets killed, or he sees his friend who earlier was peeing on a tree.
Yeah. First he goes to try to see this sacred text that was written by is like passed down and written by inbred members of their community.
Yes, to keep them pure.
Mm-hmm. And he gets told no, gets told no, gets told no, gets told no. Actually he does personally see the member of the community that wrote it, right?
He does. And then he wanted to take a photograph of it and was not allowed to, but then he snuck into the no-no room.
Right.
To take a picture of it.
Right.
Shortly after his friend, not Josh, his friend Stifler.
Yes. The guy from
Bandersnatch.
Yeah, we're the Millers.
Yeah. Sneaks off to, it doesn't sneak off, pees on their sacred tree.
Yep.
And ends up getting killed for it. And then the inbred member of their community.
I mean, he ends up getting killed because they're all going to get killed.
Because because everybody going to die.
I mean, if you look at the walls, it tells you the whole story.
You should watch this movie, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's worth watching.
Yeah.
We'll wait. But they take his face off.
Not just his face.
Oh, sorry. His scalp and his face off.
I mean, I feel like they take all of his skin off.
I feel like they took all of him. Like
Skin
John
face
Legend
off?
level of all of him becomes all of you.
Oh, God.
Oh, you got to see Jamie Foxx do John Legend. It's great.
We'll wait.
I'm sorry, guys.
But yeah,
My
like,
fault.
but they take that all off, and then he gets smashed in, or Chidi, sorry.
So that is
Josh.
another part that I thought was really cool. You know, when he gets hit on the head, he gets like a huge hammer blow to the head.
With the hospice hammer.
Yeah.
No. Hospice hammer is not a thing. So he has this blow to his head. Immediately he's knocked out, but human bodies are pretty resilient. He wakes up a few seconds later, which happened. I mean, if you've ever seen someone get knocked out or hit their head, you know, it's like for a second, it's like, are they dead? And then he's kind of coming to, but also he had a pretty significant injury. He's moaning and groaning on the ground.
He had a dent in his head, which
But
looks
that's
super realistic.
And that's the thing that I thought was cool was like he had this damage to his head.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it for a second, and then it starts oozing,
Yep.
and then it starts kind of pouring blood. Your scalp has a ton of vascular supply. It bleeds a lot when you get hurt.
So you can actually die from a scalp lock just by itself. You can lose a lot of blood.
It gets
really
pulled
quickly.
out.
Yep.
But I liked that there was that. It's like it's a horrific injury, but then it's that kind of little delay that made it feel realistic and right.
Yeah.
I do have a question of the Ruby Rod character wearing his skin. And number one, it fit ridiculously well. Like he was wearing his full, like all of his face and his hair and everything as a mask all the way down.
Sometimes you got to wear that skinny skin.
But also, you don't know that it fit very well. You know that
The front
the
fit
front
well.
fit well. You don't know what that looked like in the back. He's business in the front, party in the back. That
It's
could
like
be
that-
all open.
It's like that Homer meme where he looks really skinny, but in the back you see a bunch of clips holding his fat. That's
And I-
kind of what it is.
Actually, there's a thing I wrote later. I don't want to skip ahead. Whatever. But there's the thing I wrote about later. So when he's in the bear suit, right?
Yeah.
And so that they do good foreshadowing. They show the butcher.
If you haven't seen this movie yet,
You probably should. It's going to be more fun if you see the movie. But you know, they have the butcher teaching the kids, like that's how you learn how to butcher an animal.
Yeah.
But so when they finally have him sewed up in the barn, at the bottom of where they have him sewed up in the bear suit, there's this one little section where the skin is a little bit flipped out. Like you can clearly see the bear has been stitched up, but at the bottom there's some pink skin that's been inverted. And I remember in part of med school is they teach you menial tasks that will make you helpful for the experienced people that are doing things.
Yeah.
And so one of them is learning how to suture, and that reminded me of like, oh, you know, he got to the bottom, the guy's all sewed in, and then he's like, all right, oldest child, now it's your turn to close this up.
It's the
And
ugliest
he
one.
didn't quite do a good job, but also it's functional. We're burning this anyway.
Yeah. I remembered that. Like in med school, you're like sewing up a whole case. Like the surgeon's doing is like, you can do the last
you can
5 inches.
You can staple that right there.
Yeah.
Good job.
But it's going to look bad. Yeah, that's fine.
It's fine. I think it's important to know that the only way to get new doctors is you have to train new doctors. And part of that is not everything is going to be perfect. And you go to the emergency room. The goal isn't to look perfect. The goal is to, stop your bleeding, keep you from dying. You go to the plastic surgeon and you expect a perfect.
I will say, when I do sutures in my ER, I will stay there for the first 3 or 4 sutures my resident does. And if it looks horrible, I will take over because it has to look good.
Yeah. Actually there's a psychological part of recovery, which is if you look good, you feel good. And so things like that matter.
Yeah.
Part of the new thing that they've been trying to do, and actually this was new a couple of years ago, but for people with brain tumors and significant head injuries, where they really, they're gonna take off part of the skull, they stopped doing full head shave. They started doing incisional shaving, and people had faster, better recoveries just from something as simple as
having hair.
You don't look as sick anymore.
Yeah, because it's true. You lose your hair, you look.
You look weird.
Instead of having a shaved head, you have a faux hawk.
and they're
not a joke.
Faux hawks are in right now.
Yeah. The character Mark, whose name we didn't remember, had one.
He did have one. He actually did. And that was functional. It makes it easier to sew up in the back.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know that his, I'm going to go back to the Ruby Rod wearing Mark as a skin because he was wearing all of his front bits as a skin.
You're right. He did.
And I think that a lot of that stuff that doesn't quite make sense makes sense if you look at the pictures on the wall. That's how the things happen. So that's how they happen.
Yeah.
This will make more sense if you've seen the movie. So it's probably a good break to say, go watch it.
You know what didn't make sense? How everyone jumped to, what's this hair in the pie? Oh, pube instead of beard.
Yeah, as someone with a poorly trimmed beard because of COVID, it's probably a beard hair.
Johnny, your beard is amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
It
looks nothing like
lopsided.
pubes.
It's great.
For the listeners, I cannot grow a beard, and it makes me sad every day.
Mine grows in patchy.
Yeah.
I can't grow head hair, so you guys win.
I think the last big thing that I wrote down that was weird and concerning is the blood eagle. For those who don't know what a blood eagle is, Johnny, would you like to explain the blood eagle?
A blood eagle is a horrific Scandinavian method of execution where they literally cut your back open and pull your lungs out.
That also means they break your ribs. This would hurt.
From the backside.
Your back ribs.
This would hurt real bad.
Your baby back ribs.
And we were, after the movie ended, we were talking about it. And would it be possible to do this as a torture? I mean, in the sense that if you were would you be alive after?
Yeah, in the film, Josh is still breathing.
It wasn't Josh. It was Blood Eagle. It was someone else.
It was Mark.
It wasn't Mark either. It was the other two that we didn't care about.
Yeah. It was London guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
But he's you see his lungs inflating and deflating.
Yeah.
And it's Christian, the boyfriend, who sees it.
Yeah.
And he's drugged all to heaven.
I don't think there's a good answer. I think that from a modern perspective, you could do this to somebody with proper anesthesia and analgesics, and you would keep them alive. You could keep them alive. Granted, he would need to be intubated. He would have to have a whole bunch of other stuff. This guy has none of that.
No,
it looks just.
He's literally in a chicken coop.
Yeah, but my comment was, if you don't care if he's alive later, then it doesn't matter if he's in a chicken coop.
I'm gonna break
his ribs.
Format for a second, break his ribs and format for a second, and say, in the human centipede, this would be totally possible.
For sure.
Yeah.
But in Dutch country, Pennsylvania, less so.
Well, I mean, it's like you could do this to a person. I don't know if your lungs would still work if they're out of the body. I mean, that's a real question.
So that is actually a big question because
I have an answer now that we talked about it.
No.
You go first.
So you can't because your diaphragm's what drives negative pressure to expand your lungs.
That's exactly what I was just going to say.
Now, if you were putting a hose in his mouth and inflating it, then yes, you can inflate his lungs. But the fact that the lungs are outside of the body without negative pressure to increase expansion of the lungs, you can't do.
Yes, I don't know if you guys have heard me talk before, but often I need to talk things out. And as I was talking, I figured it out.
It's my favorite part of editing this podcast, guys. I love listening to Greg think through things. It's fantastic.
Come on. You can do it.
You'll make it.
Almost. Oh, it was so close. Oh, it's like when that guy in the Geico commercial has that dollar bill on there. Oh, you're almost there. Just a little bit closer.
Come on, you'll get it.
You'll get it. You'll get it.
But that actually the next part of that scene made me laugh because the guy he's very surprised by seeing his friend this guy as a blood eagle. He turns around and there's one of the
pixie dust
Swedish
in his
people,
face.
right? He gets dust blood in his face, and all I was thinking was that's got to be the most dangerous way to blow paralyzing dust and like to get paralyzing dust in someone's face because you have to breathe in first.
Yeah.
And if you're going to breathe in, you might get some. That seems like pretty potent stuff.
Yeah. I also like the way they close his eye. Like half the screen closes at a time because they were closing one eye at a time.
Now, I'm speaking from a cycloptic perspective.
Whenever I close my eye, everything goes down. I'm sorry. I love Johnny, and I shouldn't make fun of his eye, but I also am amazed by it.
For the biclopes on this podcast, is that actually what happens when you close one eye and then the other? I mean, do you lose half the screen?
That's such an amazing question because, of course, you would ask that, right? Because you have no experience with it.
I was born blind on my left side,
and it's so easy to make fun of that. But no, that is your entire experience. Every time you close your eye, everything goes away.
Everyone should do that at home.
Please make fun of my entire experience whenever you
When you close one eye at home, do you lose half of your vision?
No, you don't.
When I was in high school and early college, a lot of my friends came up to me and said, I tried driving with one eye closed because they just learned to drive. And they also knew I had one eye and they also knew that I could drive a car. And they were like, how do you do this? And they could not do it.
Well, your entire experience is based on it.
Your brain is wired differently.
Yeah, it really is.
And what I was saying was it would be so easy to make fun of you for asking that, but it's legitimate.
And you did.
It's a legitimate. No, I mean, I didn't make fun of you for asking that. I thought it was an amazing. Maybe I did during the movie. That's entirely possible. I mean,
and that's fine because, well,
you get to make fun of your friends when it's when you know each other. It's fine. But the thing, I mean, most people have binocular vision. Our vision, we get sensation from both of our eyes, and our brain combines them. That's why we can see things and we can judge distances in 3D space and all that stuff. Our brains are pretty cool. But also, you know that your eyes don't see exactly the same thing. They're offset. That's why we do get depth percent. You don't get the exact same picture from both of your eyes.
What?
It's like I'm answering Johnny's question. He doesn't know this because it's not his experience. But as you know, it's like that scene in Wayne's World. That's a better representation, right? He does that camera 1, camera 2 thing, and the screen shifts a little bit, and that's how we get our visual input. And so normally, if you close one eye, you might lose a little peripheral vision on that side, but you wouldn't just lose half of your screen.
Right. Yeah, my peripheral vision is like, I think 84% of what a normal person's is.
That is very specific.
Like, it's like I had it measured when I did a...
because he relies on it.
Yeah, when I did a vision test.
But yeah, that was a silly scene. I get the artistic part of it.
And then he wakes up exactly the same way with left side of screen and right side of screen.
Yeah, because they paralyzed him and they told him, you will be able to hear, but you will not be able to speak.
Right.
I don't know any medications that do that.
I don't know any medications that do that. I think sometimes scopolamine is treated like that in Hollywood as like this zombie drug.
It is.
It's not. That's not quite what it is. There are paralytics, like the things they use in anesthesia.
But you don't breathe.
But there are like combinations of things where maybe this would be possible. What I was thinking about was locked-in syndrome.
Yeah, which is actually surprising. That's actually what I thought too.
Not surprising at all. That's the thing to think about.
Yeah.
Wait, the two doctors thought about the same.
It's a scary disease that I hope I would not wish on my worst enemy. But locked-in syndrome is when you have a stroke of your pons, I believe. I think like somewhere in your brainstem.
I think it can come from a few causes, but
you can only move your eye up and down, and that's about it.
You can blink. You can move your eyes vertically.
You're consciously all there.
And your brain is there and functioning normally from a thought consciousness perspective, but you cannot move. You cannot.
Your motor system.
You're effectively fully paralyzed in a way that's not like spinal paralysis.
Correct. There was a Scrubs episode about this too.
Of course. I bet if there's ever any medical show has a episode about
There's also a movie called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, I believe, is a movie about locked-in syndrome. And that one is not a feel-good movie.
if there's ever an episode of The Resident with locked-in syndrome, I call it. I hate that show, and I can't wait to see how they treat it.
Probably next month is what we're gonna do. I'll see what I can find. I can't. Oh God, that show. Johnny's on board with it now.
Yeah, the second episode of The Resident that we watched, I really liked. The first episode was a rough one.
You in court.
And let me say, I only choked my way through the first episode. You shouldn't judge a show by the pilot episode, but also that was an infuriating watch.
Yeah, agreed.
That was Jackson's Dominion too.
Yeah.
John Scalzi, going back to Locked In Syndrome and just going to plug an author that I really liked, did a science fiction series of all of a sudden this was a viral thing that happened. And so people with Locked In Syndrome were able to connect to robots. Ooh. And so, yes, they're still locked in their bodies, but they're also walking around as robots being detectives.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's great.
Doing all that stuff. Yep. Doing all that stuff for sure. I think the movie ends climactically. I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch before we talk about
I want to touch on the Mayday dance.
I want to touch on one. So
Greg wants to touch something.
So they do that ball selection, right? The lottery ball selection.
Yeah.
And the little wooden ball comes down the track. So one of the things that you might not know, especially if you have never been to a pediatric hospital, is they often have these beautiful, colorful, fun lobbies because it has to cater to families and children. That's their patient population, and a lot of these places have these elaborate sort of like perpetual motion ball machines, and perpetual motion is the wrong word, but basically a gravity machine where
marble race.
Thank you, like a marble race. And that is one of those things where I have watched for like my entire lunch hour, just like watching this complicated ball dropping machine go around and like hit various noisemakers and make things. And it's just like, whenever I'm doing this with you guys, I try to bring anything I can from the medical establishment. And that had a very visceral, watching that made me happy. So when I did my fellowship, the hospital in Denver, they had like a traveling one that they would switch them out. It was some of the most elaborate thing. I mean, they have it at museums sometimes.
Yeah. That's what I think about.
Yeah. And
I know we don't have one at my hospital.
I don't think they have one at Miller's, but I mean, I would watch the one in Denver for my lunch break.
For hour.
Yeah. However long it took me to get my Jimmy John's and then go sit and watch
4 hour.
The Mayday dance.
Yeah. Maypole dance?
Yeah, the Maypole dance.
Not the communism dance?
Right.
Okay.
So everyone was doped to the gills, and all of a sudden, Danny was either understanding Swedish or was just communicating via whatever.
I think there's artistic license there. I mean, my interpretation was not that she's speaking Swedish. They say
gibberish.
We're connected. Yeah. But we're communicating through dance, right? And so she understands the dance, so they understand each other. It's not like they're talking about anything.
Yeah, I think it was just a shared kind of situation.
It's part of that sort of you're participating in this cultural moment, and now you're no longer an outsider. Now you're part of the group. So now
kind of like I feel sometimes hosting this podcast.
Yeah. You're an outsider. There was not even a pause. I'm just kidding. You're great.
Yeah. I say we take this home to the final scene, which is pretty dramatic, where they put the 4 people that died, 2 old people that died,
and 2 volunteers,
and then Christian and a bear into the house and burned it on fire to sacrifice them. That was nuts.
Yeah, that was hard for me to watch for no other reason than I don't like to see people suffer. I mean, there
was a lot of screaming, and not just from inside that house.
Yeah.
They were screaming everywhere.
And I think that's part of the whole, message of her transformation of Danish transformation into now a part of the culture is like, she is now fully engaged, with the communal moaning with them.
Yeah.
It's not that people are including her. It's that she is now doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. The second time seeing it was like
cathartic for her.
So much. No, I mean, second time seeing this movie. Cathartic for me, maybe. But I thought it was. It's the same thing as that Maypole dance, right? Like you see she's engaged in a way that's different than her being an outsider being there.
Yeah.
And like now she has her family. That's like the catharsis, right? This is her.
Yeah.
She's not going back. She doesn't have anything to go back home to.
No.
That was one of the things that Pele said in the very beginning was...
The soccer player?
Yeah.
He's
It's
good
a
at
weird cameo, but I
Yeah.
bought it.
That bicycle kick scene was amazing.
But it in the mushroom scene in the very beginning of the movie, one of the members of the community, the guy who brought them there, said, my family died, my parents died in a fire. Your parents just died. I'm technically an orphan too, and that's a
Worst pickup line ever.
I was gonna go with an honest, heartfelt moment, but thank you, Jackson.
You're welcome.
As a someone who's lost a parent as a early adult, that mindset makes sense. It'd still be the worst pickup line ever. So sorry, Jackson.
Right. I think when people have really big loss, there's a thought that no one else has experienced. Like no one can know what I'm going through. Nobody understands. And I mean, that's part of why therapy works is people do understand, but it's also hard for us to talk about those things. And so it can feel very isolating and alone. I think that's a thing. I mean, Danny's boyfriend is physically there for her when things happen, but he doesn't really ever address it. He never wants to really talk about her emotional stuff. And so that's some people need that, some people don't, but knowing that somebody else has had that experience is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's why that comes across as heartfelt. It is a heartfelt thing.
Mm-hmm. With that, I do have a question.
Okay. Oh, I know where this is going. I mean, I should.
Wait, you guys do questions now?
Yeah.
I know.
The human centipede.
There it is.
Oh, that question. Okay.
There.
Yeah. The human centipede marketed itself as 100% medically accurate. If that's the case, and that's our baseline, how medically accurate is Midsommar, Dr. Jackson Bain?
200. I would say it's twice as accurate.
Here's why I disagree, because although the human centipede says it's 100% accurate, it isn't.
I know.
So,
But we're using it as a baseline.
but it's more than double better than that. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
So what would you say it would be?
I mean, in comparison, it'd be like 500%.
Got it.
Because nothing in here is. I will say I don't know what any of those drugs are. There's some artistic license with the Blood Eagle.
You know what? You got me. 300%.
I say 500.
I mean, that's fair. I think those are fair numbers. It averages to 400%. It's okay.
What's the mean?
I gotta look at the.
The mean is
It's
much
100.
lower. The record was about 250 for Saw 2, which was literally the first time I asked that question.
Okay.
Then
So-
this is appropriate.
Yeah.
Fair. I mean, I'm fine. You know what? I'm fine. Yeah, fine with what I said.
I think that is fair.
Then a weird question to ask, given the incredible medical accuracy of this film, according to the esteemed panel of physicians,
All two of us.
is there anything you would do to keep the dramatic stakes high but increase the medical accuracy?
I mean, I think the Blood Eagle is the biggest thing where there's artistic,
Yeah,
like you said, your lungs wouldn't
dead.
work outside
You're
of your
dead.
butt. You're dead.
You're dead.
And also, I don't think it would take anything away from that scene to just have him be dead there and being eaten by
I
the
think
chicken.
he was.
He was
I think
breathing.
I think that was a hallucination. We've seen floors
Oh, I
and
didn't see-
flowers
I
pulsing all the time.
Smart.
So 600, 400?
No, 500, 300. I mean,
try.
I think that is fair. Like, if that is a hallucination, because again, this is one of those situations we're not sure what's true.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
A lot of it is delusion.
We have an unreliable narrator in the form of drugs.
Yeah. Our narrator for this film is just drugs.
Midsommar, brought to you by drugs.
Yeah. All right. With that, if you guys haven't watched Midsommar by now, we kind of recommend it.
You know what? We'll wait for a second. You guys can go do it and
Yeah.
just
If you got
re-listen.
2 hours, just hit pause. I think it's on HBO Max.
Amazon Prime.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another lighthearted, fun-filled romp through post-traumatic stress disorder and Blood Eagles.
It's still Hortober.
It might not be by the time this episode airs.
It may be Hortober.
It may still be Hortober.
Also, if you're interested in Blood Eagles, there's a show on Netflix called Norsemen. The Norsemen, I highly recommend it. I was telling these guys about it. I think it's great.
Oh, and
it's a comedy about Vikings.
If you're interested in the perspective of people who are differently abled, a friend of mine, just started a podcast called Life and Limb. She's has a tiny foot. Co-host has a tiny hand, and they're talking about their lives dealing with that. So check that one out too.
You had me at Life and Limb. Can you
It's
have
a
a
great title.
podcast without a pun title? Nope.
I don't think so.
I actually don't think so.
I don't believe so.
With that, thanks folks for listening, and we'll be back next week with more lovely discussions on what Hollywood gets right and wrong about medicine and how the body works.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, folks.